You wanted to talk to me about this drone situation, and I've become very concerned. I don't understand what's going on. I think there's a bunch of different narratives. Some of them are very scary.
These objects appear to be coming from over the ocean. There's senior congressmen, there's Coast Guard personnel, there's law enforcement. They're seeing a large number of these come from somewhere over the ocean. I don't know if that means necessarily they're popping out of the water physically, or if they're coming from some unknown location in the water and then proceeding over the coast. I don't know how that relates to Ohio. That's a pretty long trip if they are coming over the ocean. And from the videos I've seen and the conversation I've had, they are detecting these objects through kind of normal mechanisms like radar systems, optical camera systems. They are flying very low. In some cases, they seem to be operating as a group in the vicinity of each other, flying past each other, flying very up close to each other, and then proceeding to do whatever they are that they're doing. It's an unknown right now if they are emitting energy or not. So, like radio communications or their own maybe active sensor systems. It's unknown. I've poked on that front, and the best I can tell, the government doesn't know either.
That seems so weird that they don't know that.
So my next guest is the first active duty pilot to speak publicly about sightings of unidentified aerial phenomenon, also known as UAPs. He flew F-18s in the Navy and served in 2 deployments in Operation Enduring Freedom and Operation Inherent Resolve. He says he has witnessed these UAPs firsthand.
UAP are in our airspace, but they are grossly underreported. These sightings are not rare or isolated, they are routine. Parts of our government are aware of more about UAP than they let on, but excessive classification practices keep crucial information hidden. Since 2021, all UAP videos are classified as secret or above. This level of secrecy not only impedes our understanding, but fuels speculation and mistrust.
But ultimately, there is tech, there's electro-optical systems, there's infrared camera systems, not unlike the jets or the systems that we had on my jet. But we were able to detect these objects with infrared when we were flying off the eastern seaboard. There are a number of reports from law enforcement that their infrared systems are not able to pick these objects up. And not just this year, but also the incidents over Langley last year. The pilots that responded to that incident, I've spoken to them, they weren't able to lock these up with their infrared systems either. So they do seem to be exhibiting some type of signature management.
I'm curious what goes through your mind when you listen to John Kirby at the White House podium basically saying, gee, we think it's weird too, and we really don't know anything about it.
Yeah, well, thanks for having me here today. It seems like the different branches of the government aren't communicating very well on this problem. And for me, it leads me to believe that there is a true uncertainty about what's going on here. I find it hard to believe that the Biden administration can continue this policy of cognitive dissonance on this topic. Hundreds of people are seeing these events. They've occurred not just this year, but years in the past in the same area. And this is now a reoccurring trend that we need to come to terms with and be able to deal from a national security perspective and from a domain awareness perspective.
So for them to be able to make these high G maneuvers and then remain in the area for another 5 or 6 or 7 hours and still have the battery life or whatever's propelling them, to then go over the ocean to a point where they're untrackable. Again, I'm not really familiar with that type of capability either. So I engage with these folks. I ask them, what's the sense here? People are kind of starting to panic a little bit, and this message is getting out there more and more broadly. And they assured me that's not the case, that there is not a loose nuke or other type of weapon of mass destruction that these objects, whatever they are pursuing right now. Otherwise, they would be working in a skiff nonstop to make that go away, that problem go away. So, that's part of why I have a high confidence level that this is not a response to a massive imminent, weapons of mass destruction threat on the eastern seaboard. So I just want to try to dispel that rumor right now. I've seen a lot of talk of that online, and I don't, although this is I think a dangerous and scary situation that's going on right now, at least from that particular angle.
Is there any truth to this idea that we have the type of drone capability that we could send these things out and they would search for gamma radiation and they'd be able to find a nuke? Is that?
So there are teams that respond to those types of potential emergencies, typically within the Department of Energy. Having potentially hundreds of drones flying around trying to identify these isn't necessarily the best way. Gamma radiation is typically well shielded in weapons, and at very high altitudes or even moderate altitudes, like we're seeing these objects, it would be pretty difficult to detect them. And the way that NIST, the DOE, typically operates in this environment is ground-based teams searching for radiation itself. So it's not necessarily consistent with how they would do it to begin with. And then based off of that other information, that's what leads me to believe that's not the case.
Well, that makes me feel better because I was freaking out this weekend.
I think a lot of people were.
Yeah, I got a couple. But it's one of those things, especially in this day and age with social media. There's so many narratives that get spread and retweeted. And, I know a guy who's an insider and he says to get out of the East Coast and, head for Nevada. Or, there's a lot of that going on.
Yeah.
So as a former F-18 pilot and a trained pilot, obviously still, why don't we just shoot a couple of these down when they're over a rural area, which they are every single night in New Jersey, and get a look at them?
Ultimately, our systems that we typically employ, especially on fighter aircraft, are not well designed for very small targets, both from a targeting perspective as well as a collateral damage perspective. But before we talk about shooting these down, we have a lot of investment and a lot of capabilities within our government to be able to identify objects at a distance. And we need to bring the full brunt of the government and the Pentagon's force at play here to be able to understand what these are, identify them, characterize them, and if need be at that point, choose a prime target to bring down and further inspect.
Do you have a sense or a theory based on your work as to what these are?
It's very tough to say. What we do know is that this is something that we have been dealing with for multiple years in this region of the country, starting in Virginia Beach at Langley Air Force Base last year as well. And now we're having exponentially more sightings just hundreds of miles to the north. And it's not restricted to just people on the ground. My nonprofit, Americans for Safe Aerospace, has been receiving reports from commercial pilots, military pilots, and veterans for over a year now, showing how consistent and how problematic this issue is at altitude where they're flying around. We need to have a better coordinated response and actually listen to the people on the ground and in the air that are seeing things. And I would encourage them to use this as an opportunity to destigmatize this topic, encourage more reporting, whether that be through existing mechanisms or at safeaerospace.org, so that we have a true accounting and understanding of how prevalent this problem is.
Well, you say that we have ability to get a good look at them in the sky. We don't necessarily need to shoot them down. What can we ascertain from that? Can we tell if they're coming from a foreign entity, or if they're coming from our own Department of Defense, or if they're coming from a corporate entity right here in the country?
Based on my analysis of the situation and the statements made by the Pentagon and the legislative branch, I cannot believe that this is our own government acting in such confusion. God help us if so. Same for commercial contractors. There's zero benefit, all risk for operating these things so close to the ground, especially if it's some type of classified equipment. That leaves foreign adversaries or something else. And we've heard directly from the Pentagon that there is no so-called mothership off the coast of Virginia and New Jersey that is launching these items. But to directly answer your question, we have some of the most sophisticated radar systems on the eastern seaboard. We should, with great certainty, know exactly where these objects are, where they're going, and where they're setting down if they are. So either these things have the ability to counter those technologies, or we're simply lying about what's happening right now.
So it sounds like
I don't have the answer.
One of the, so you're saying foreign entity. You ruled out a couple of options based on your experience. Foreign entity or something else. What falls into the something else category, Ryan?
Well, for a number of years, people have been reporting what is known as unidentified anomalous phenomena, which are unattributed, unknown objects of unknown intent that seem to be exhibiting performance characteristics that are beyond our state of the art. Now, I haven't seen particular videos in the number that have been released publicly on social media and elsewhere that would give me a high level of confidence that there are these exotic capabilities being exhibited. But the whole behavior in general doesn't leave very much room for other options if it's not a foreign adversary.
Unbelievable. And you say it's not too popular within the government, your experience, to bring these things up and to talk about them. And yet they're out there and they're flying in all different directions. They are, basically turning the lights off when something gets too close to them, and they only come out at night. Final thought, Ryan.
Well, I think we need to just kind of cut through this conversation and have an honest conversation with the American people about what's happening, what our capabilities are. And if we are uncertain with it, we need to deal with that and institute national reform to be able to better report these things and study them as a phenomenon itself.
Ryan Graves, thank you. Wouldn't we all love to be a fly on the wall at the Department of Defense and Homeland Security, because you can guarantee they're having more open conversations than what they're sharing so far. We got to find out what's going on in the skies above our homes.
So is the signature management so is it a heat signature that they're giving off? So maybe there's some sort of a cooling mechanism inside of these things? Like how, if they have a propulsion system, so you would imagine it's some sort of an electric engine, right? Because a lot of them are very quiet. That's got to be giving off some kind of heat, right?
Yeah, and that goes to some like very base physics, right? Like we create heat whenever we have, stored energy and we utilize it. So to be able to mitigate that to such a degree that you can't even detect them at all, it's pretty tough. I mean, I can imagine you can reduce your signature. We do it in fighter jets, right? Through kind of just like baffles where we cover the engine essentially to make it harder to see. But to have zero ability to detect or lock onto these objects is not a technology I'm familiar with.